Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sylvia and I just love all kinds of true crime stories and unsolved mysteries. And today's case is a story that was adapted into a popular movie called Open Water. And I will be talking about the terrifying true story that inspired this film. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down below because I put out videos like this every week. So if you're interested in this one, you'll probably be interested in the next. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's dive into the case of the missing divers, Tom and Eileen Lonergan. If you guys have never heard of this movie, Open Water came out in 2003, and it's about a couple that gets left behind by their tour boat in shark-infested waters. It's on Hulu if you guys want to watch it. I saw it a few months ago, and I didn't really like it that much. Even though I wasn't a fan, maybe you'd want to watch it. It's one of those movies where there's like two scenes that like actually show the sharks, but I guess they did what they could. Tom and Eileen Lonergan were a Louisiana couple who had just finished up a 2-year tour with the Peace Corps. They had traveled all around the South Pacific, and they were excited to end their travels with one trip to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. They were ready for some rest and recovery after all their hard work in the Peace Corps, and they were also super excited to explore one of the natural wonders of the world. The couple had met at Louisiana State University, where Eileen introduced Tom to scuba diving. She was already an avid diver, and he quickly took to the hobby as well. Both of them worked as teachers, but they had quickly lost their passion for their profession, and they felt extremely burnt out, and that's why they joined the Peace Corps to get some new perspective on life. The couple arrived in Cairns, Australia in late January 1998, and they were extremely excited to see the Great Barrier Reef in person, and they signed up for a dive outing on a tour boat from the company called Outer Edge. And this is where things start to go wrong. When everyone first piled onto the boat, the crew did a head count of the excited divers before they headed out into open water. The crew did a second head count before heading back to shore. The crew member who was counting realized that they were missing 2 people, but then he saw 2 divers jump out of the water. These divers had previously been counted and they had jumped back into the water. So when this crew member saw them climbing onto the boat, he assumed that they were the missing 2 divers. And without repeating the head count to make sure, this boat headed back to shore. Now that was the first tip that things might not have been right on the Outer Edge tour. Now the second came when that same boat from Outer Edge returned to that exact spot later that day with a different tour group. Some of the guests with this tour group found some weights at the bottom of the ocean floor. Now, divers use weights to help them stay on the bottom of the ocean because when you're swimming underwater, your body will naturally start to float back up to the surface. And divers like to use these weights so that they can continue to explore without having to constantly fight to keep themselves on the ocean floor. Now, nobody put 2 and 2 together. The divers who found these just thought that they got lucky, and nobody had realized that there were divers still in that very water that had been abandoned. Tom and Eileen's hotel had arranged for a driver to drop them off at the dock and then to pick them up a few hours later to take them back to the hotel. Now, this driver arrived and did not see the couple anywhere, so he searched some local shops, still didn't see them, and went back to the hotel. After their last tour of the day, the crew members noticed that there were 2 backpacks that had been left on the boat after hours. The person who noticed these backpacks did not look inside and instead dropped them off at the Lost and Found at the tour company's dock. 2 days later, on January 27th, one of the employees decided to look inside these backpacks, and this is where he found the passports of Tom and Eileen Lonergan. Realizing that this was a very important document, he called the hotel that they had been staying at. And this is when he found out that the hotel had not seen the couple in 2 days. So Oh my God, no one even noticed that this couple was missing until 2 days after they had been left at sea. And at this point in time, the Lonergans could have been anywhere on that side of the Pacific. Tom and Eileen Lonergan were never seen again, but this was not the last trace of the couple that would ever be found. 6 months after their disappearance, a dive slate was found. Divers used dive slates to write messages to other people in their group or to write notes about their excursion. This dive slate contained an extremely disturbing message. It said, Monday, January 26th, 1998, 8 a.m. To anyone who can help us, we have been abandoned on Agincourt Reef by MV Outer Edge, January 25th, 1998, 3 p.m. Please help to rescue us before we die. Help, with 3 exclamation points. So this shows that the couple had at least survived the night. And I'm sure that that was an extremely terrifying night, it being completely dark out on the open sea, hearing the waves lapping, not knowing. And I'm sure that this was a night filled with horror, as it was completely dark on the open ocean and they could hear the waves lap, make noises, not knowing if it was some sort of sea creature approaching them. A dive suit matching the same size Eileen wore also washed up around this same time at Port Douglas Beach, approximately 75 miles from where the couple originally were separated from their boat. This dive suit was in bad shape and there were tears all over it. However, due to the fact that there was no blood on the suit, they think that these tears came from it being dragged along coral on the ocean floor and not from sharks attacking Eileen while she was wearing the suit. Along with the suit, inflatable dive jackets with Tom and Eileen's name on them, Eileen's fins, and their compressed air tanks were found. Most people do not believe that they were attacked by sharks. Instead, it's more likely that while they were floating on the open ocean, they either succumbed to drowning after spending all their energy, or they died of dehydration. You can't drink the ocean water because it will dehydrate you, and they were diving, so it's not like they had packed any food in their wetsuits. This is the theory that the movie Open Water goes with. The director believes that the couple was eaten by sharks. There are plenty of shark species that surround Australia, including tiger sharks and great whites, which have been known to attack humans. Spoiler alert, if you've never seen Open Water, the finale is when Tom is eaten alive by sharks while Eileen watches in horror. And then the final scene is Eileen removing her equipment that was enabling her to float, resigning herself to the same fate as her husband. Of course, this is Hollywood. They're going to go with the craziest, most entertaining ending for their story. However, most scientists don't believe that Tom and Eileen were attacked by sharks at any point in their time on the open ocean. Sharks don't typically attack humans as they don't resemble their natural food source. They're much more comfortable eating fish and sea life, which was abundant in the middle of the ocean where Tom and Eileen were floating. Or maybe a curious shark took a bite out of them, wounding one of them, and that caused a feeding frenzy, or maybe one of them just bled out. However, floating on the ocean, baking in the hot sun all day without any source of drinkable water must have been terrible, and I do think that the couple would have quickly succumbed to the elements. So who knows how long they were actually out there, because there have been stories of people surviving on the open ocean by themselves for months. And the Pacific Ocean being the largest ocean in the world, they could have been searched for and then passed over for months before they died. However, it's possible that the couple decided that they couldn't survive out there any longer, and just days into their situation, they took off all of their equipment to purposefully speed up the cruel process that Mother Nature was already putting them through. Authorities found Tom and Eileen's respective diaries back at their home in Louisiana, and they found some worrying and dark information. Eileen openly admitted to hating her life as a teacher, and she also expressed concerns regarding Tom. She felt like Tom and her were no longer separate people. Their lives were far too intertwined and they had lost their autonomy. She also wrote that she was worried that her husband had developed a death wish. She said that Tom wanted a sudden and painless death, but he was too scared to do it himself. Tom's diary had evidence to support this. He wrote that he felt, quote, like a student who has finished an exam. I feel like my life is complete and I am ready to die. This leads to the theory that Tom would purposefully end things on their vacation, whether it was a pact that they had or if it was a murder-suicide. It's possible that Tom purposefully kept them entertained beneath the surface while the boat sailed away. This also could be a coincidence because the couple was in the Peace Corps, they were away from their teaching jobs, which clearly weren't good for their mental health, and they had also made plans for what they were going to do once they got back to America. Some people believe that the couple faked their deaths, especially since they were unhappy with their teaching. If they did do this, it would have been a very difficult feat. They would have completely started from scratch because their bank accounts had been untouched. Their passports were also left behind, so they would have had to either stay in Australia or have obtained some sort of fake documentation somehow so they could leave the country. One boat captain was on a diving expedition with Italian tourists on that same day where Tom and Eileen went missing. When they were sailing back towards shore, he noticed that among the Italian chatter, he could hear some American voices. So his theory is that Tom and Eileen jumped aboard the ship. However, the ocean is huge, and I find it very unlikely that this captain's boat passed by the exact same spot where the couple had been floating. So, leading us to the fallout of this horrible tragedy that was this couple being left out on the open water. In 1999, the owner of Outer Edge Diving Company, Jack Nairn, was charged with manslaughter. He was acquitted of all criminal charges, but later he was found guilty in civil court. He was found guilty of negligence since his boating company did not follow basic safety protocol. All the negative PR surrounding Jack forced him to close Outer Edge permanently, obviously. Australia also released headcount regulations for tour boats so that what happened to Tom and Eileen wouldn't happen to anyone ever again. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this case. Do you think that they survived for just a few hours after they sent off that dive slate? Or do you think they were out there for months? Because I know that the longest anyone has ever survived on the open ocean was about 400 days, and that's longer than a year. Do you think that this was all some sort of horrible accident caused by the negligent crew members? Or do you think that Tom and Eileen purposefully stayed behind so that they could pass away in the ocean they loved so much? I guess it really is just a mystery how Tom and Eileen Lonergan died. I've never been scuba diving before. I just think that maybe it's a little bit too much for me. But if you do go scuba diving, please make sure that you communicate with your boat's captain so he knows when you are back on the boat so you don't get left behind like Tom and Eileen. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. You might be saying, Sylvia, this isn't a crime case, but it is because the crime is negligence. If you like hearing scary stories like this that aren't necessarily based around crime, then please let me know in the comment section below because I have plenty in mind for you guys. So that's all the information I have for you guys. If you have any vacations coming up, please have a wonderful time and stay safe.